Love Never Dies could have been good. For those who don't know, Love Never Dies is the notoriously awful sequel to Andrew Lloyd Webber's critically acclaimed musical, The Phantom of the Opera. It was based on a book written by Frederick Forsyth at Webber's request in the late 90s, the similarly awful The Phantom of Manhattan, and Webber spent the next decade trying to manipulate it into something he could put on stage. And largely he failed, though on stage it would be put regardless. But I would argue that he came so very close to succeeding. Like many unworkable shows, Love Never Dies has been workshopped to hell and back, with various versions popping up here and there. I'm almost exclusively going to be discussing the 2012 film of the Australian production, because it is the most readily available, and the only version I've personally seen. But it is useful to know that some of these elements are different in other versions of the show.
Come with me. I need to show you something. Follow me. I want to know what you think.
Writing a sequel to Phantom of the Opera is hard, because the story has a pretty final ending. The Phantom lets Christine go after she shows him a moment of true compassion, and he realizes that he's been kind of an ass. So if you wanted to pen a follow-up that still prominently featured Christine, which by all accounts Webber did, especially if you want to have romantic tension between her and the Phantom, which Webber did, then you basically have to undo the ending of the original, which is not the best ground to be standing on. And truly, I do think it's this focus on Christine and the Phantom's relationship that dooms the show, but it is not the entirety of the show. Raoul is running around being an ass, Christine has a son, Gustave, whom it is stated is the Phantom's, and part of their back and forth has to do with the Phantom meeting Gustave, and kind of wanting to co-parent him, and kind of like for a bit wanting to just kill him. And then we have the villains of the piece, Madame and Meg Giry, two minor characters from the original who here serve as the Phantom's employees at his Coney Island amusement park, Phantasma. They have this whole thing about helping the Phantom leave Paris and build his empire on Coney Island, but when Christine comes into the picture, they worry that his empire will go only to her and her son, eventually leading to Meg kidnapping Gustave with the intention of doing a murder-suicide. And much like the rest of the show, it is not handled particularly well, but unlike the rest, there's a lot more to it, more that you can sink your teeth into, and the glimmer of something that could have worked. See, Meg, in the context of Love Never Dies, is working as a performer at Phantasma, and is desperate for the Phantom's approval. In some ways, it's a nice reversal of the last show, where the Phantom is desperate for Christine's affections, and could play nicely off the Phantom's character development if Webber had bothered to keep any of it.
Who kept dancing, hoping you would save her? Who kept dying, and this is all you gave her?
She's clearly unwell in this role, though, and this plainly manifests when she sings about her desire to
sink into the sea, blue and cool and kind. Let it set me free. Let the past unwind. Leave the hurt behind.
She's depressed, disillusioned with life. In this context, her need for the Phantom's affections is understandable. She's positioned him on a pedestal as this great musical genius, the man who changed her friend's life, for better and ill, and because it is something that is just out of reach, she's able to maintain this fantasy that if she can just have him look at her, everything will be better. There's a light on the other side of the tunnel, and all she needs to get there is the favor of the Phantom. But it is only a fantasy. The Phantom doesn't care about her, not in that way, and when she finally realizes this, she snaps, she lashes out, she tries to hurt him and herself. Like a neglected child, she's convinced herself that even the Phantom's ire would be better than not mattering to him.
Always wondered how to make you watch, well, watch me now.
And I find that character arc really compelling. The show actually goes even further and implies that she's done a whole lot more for the Phantom than sing and dance.
But here's the way it works on Coney Island. They make you pay for every little crumb. I gave what they would take. I gave it for your sake. Now.
And you know, that certainly raises the stakes of Meg's desire to have her pain validated and washed away, but it's also told to us in the second to last song of the show. To be fair, this was apparently hinted at earlier in previous productions, but this is the version that we have. And as it stands, it's a truly wild piece of information to throw out that late in the game. Because the Phantom even second-handedly pimping out Meg, as is implied here, has some deeper implications for both characters. It's up there with the way the show largely ignores the Phantom's past crimes towards Christine and others, including his several murders, in that it makes it feel like the world is made of tissue paper. Crime and death and abuse don't matter, which robs the world of its melodrama, the mystique and intensity that helped make the original a classic. And here's the problem, Meg's arc is in the background for most of the show, because the twist that she's the villain is supposed to be a bit of a surprise, and so her story is massively overshadowed by that of Christine and Gustav, instead of the confrontation between Meg and the Phantom being a tense culmination of all the Phantom's failures and shortcomings. It kinda just comes out of nowhere, with very little build-up or explanation. It doesn't feel like Victorian melodrama, it feels like a child throwing a hissy fit, because Meg isn't given the time she deserves. Which is ironic, given her one desire is to be seen by the Phantom, yet she isn't even really seen by her creator. The show has other highs and lows that I could go into, how the set and costume designers clearly know the kind of show this should be, how often the music works but is let down by the lyrics or the story it's trying to tell.
You'll accept it!
Yes!
You'll embrace it!
Yes!
Let me show you the beauty!
How sometimes it just doesn't work.
Here's the big finish, and then you can go.
No, Meg, don't! Give me the gun, Meg.
Or how the show brings Christine back only to rob her of most of her agency, and so on. But the bottom line for me is that the show puts the heart-wrenching tragedy of Meg Giry on the back burner. Because Weber just had to stick it to his ex-wife whom he'd in part written Phantom for by making Christine and the Phantom get together this time around.